Okay, we are live and we are talking about Lacan's seminar on the Purloined Letter once more. In our last conversation and discussion, we went over kind of a lot of things. I think we touched a little bit on the etymology of purloined. We kind of kept talking about the theft and concealment of the letter, so on and so forth. And then now we kind of ended with Lacan's remarks on Baudelaire's translation, so homomorphism. After doing some digging, what did you find here?
Okay, maybe like a general remark about what Baudelaire was trying to accomplish when he was translating Poe is that Baudelaire kind of felt that Poe wasn't like using, I wouldn't say like extravagant language, but like Baudelaire kind of critiqued Poe's own language when he translated the text, and he wanted to make the French sound a little more, I don't know, extravagant, let's say.
Mm.
So that's kind of one of the reasons that people generally don't like his translations. Although people do like some of his translations of Poe a lot.
So
Um,
the translations, like they carry like a French, like a French tone to them, maybe rather than like adhering to what's being written in English.
yeah, definitely. And like my partner will say that Baudelaire sounds whiny compared to Poe.
Mm.
And I don't really know what he means by that, but I'm sure he has a reason to think that.
Well, it's the last conversation we had, we kind of talked about how in this specific translation, those unbecoming as well as those becoming a man, right? That specific translation, um, compared to those unbecoming a man as well as those becoming him. It doesn't seem like there's a big difference, but I think Lacan is just kind of stressing the importance, especially in this piece, he's stressing the importance of the minutia of language a little bit too, right? How these language is incredibly important for Lacan, sort of obviously. So I think there's just a little bit of that, and then maybe there's also just kind of like he's just taking a little bit of a jab at Baudelaire too.
Yeah, I mean, there's only like two real things I can think about, like translation wise in these sentences. One would be that those unbecoming, Poe doesn't write a man.
Mm.
And so you might think that he's accusing um, he's accusing, I think, the minister here, right? Yeah. He's accusing the minister of doing things that are unbecoming, sort of like a general person, as well
Mm.
as those becoming a man, which kind of makes it feel like he's almost not a man in this way. He's becoming a man, so he's still like a child, maybe, or he's maybe being emasculated here. Um,
Yeah, especially with like all the femininity stuff about what Lacan talks about earlier, with like hiding the letter, being secretive, being in the shadows, the queen especially, all of that being related to femininity. Like that's could be a little bit of a tie there, maybe.
yeah, definitely. But I don't really think that this is what Lacan is getting at here, because Lacan also translates it as what is um, becoming a man, as well as what is unbecoming a man and what is becoming of him.
Hmm.
So I don't think that's really what Lacan's getting there, but it's a nice little like foray into the depth of this translation.
No,
My
I mean, yeah. I
my
mean,
partner's
I like that.
translation. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, what did you say about your partner here?
My partner's translation, or his opinion on this translation, is that when Baudelaire writes what is unbecoming a man as well as what is becoming of him, you could read that him as referring back to a man. Because Baudelaire, the way he would
Hmm.
write, he wouldn't repeat a man twice in that sentence. So
Oh,
that would sort of make
interesting.
sense. but you could also read it as becoming of him, becoming of a minister as well. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So maybe he wouldn't want to say the word man twice, so he'll say man and he'll say him. But the problem there is that we don't know if it's the same, if referring to the same thing, or if it's referring to the minister in this case, uh, because the prefect is talking about the minister here. So that's interesting.
yeah. So I don't really know that this either sheds much light on what Lacan means. Um, it might, because that's really the only difference between um, Lacan's attempt at a translation and Baudelaire's actual translation. That's really the only difference.
Sure. I mean, it's not. I mean, again, all of this is very nuanced here. I think it's still important though, because I think it does show a bit of Lacan's general, argument being made here, or his kind of thesis being very nitpicky with how we're interpreting this story in a way. Um, but no, I'm happy with that. Thank you for helping there. Um, I'm good to continue with you, are.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to continue with the paragraph here. Lacan writes, this allows us to see the imaginary import of the character, that is, the narcissistic relation in which the minister is engaged, this time, no doubt, without knowing it. It is indicated as well as early as the second page of the English text by one of the narrator's remarks, whose form is worth savoring. The minister's ascendancy, we are told, would depend upon the robber's knowledge of the loser's knowledge of the robber. Words whose importance the author underscores by having Dupont repeat them literally after the narration of the scene of the theft of the letter. Here again, we may say that Baudelaire is imprecise in his language, and having one ask, the other confirm in these words, does the robber know? Then the robber knows. What? That the robbed knows his robber. So we're kind of seeing a little bit of a jab here, to Baudelaire as well, which is interesting. But with this first sentence here, Lacan is discussing, quote, the imaginary import of the minister, and he's noticing that it's rooted in this narcissism, this narcissistic relation. And in my notes, I wonder if this imaginary is in relation to how the minister sees himself. Because when we're dealing with the imaginary register, we're dealing with identification. So I wonder, is this narcissistic relation something that the minister sees about himself? Is he rising up higher because, in the ranks in a way, because he stole the letter? I don't know if there's anything specific about narcissism here, because narcissism in psychoanalysis can be a pretty big kind of topic.
Yeah, I
Now,
can't
yeah.
on narcissism because I know it's a very large topic, but I think you're kind of right about the imaginary import of the character part.
Yeah, I think it's something about how the minister views himself, and viewing himself. I mean, it says ascendancy, right? So he's ascending to some greater position. I mean, the minister has power now, or the minister has this weight over the kingdom, or over the rulers, like the queen, and in a way the king too, because the queen didn't want the king to know that knowledge. So he has that kind of power, and Lacan marks it as narcissistic. And then when Lacan says we are told would depend upon the robber's knowledge of the loser's knowledge of the robber, a little bit of like a tongue twister there. I think the narrator is showing that the minister's ascendancy does not necessarily solely come from the fact that he stole from the queen, but the fact that the queen is aware of the letter being stolen. So it says it depends upon the robber's knowledge. So the robber's knowledge would be the minister knowing that the loser, in this case the queen, knows that he was the robber, which is kind of interesting. It's not just a simple theft, it's that she knows. And we are kind of told in the story that she sets it on the table, the minister comes by, snatches it, and she kind of is powerless in that situation, so she knows, which I think is important. And Lacan also thinks that this is very important for the minister's specific ascendancy. And then we get to the criticism once again of Baudelaire's translation. So I think with Baudelaire's translation, which does the robber know? Question mark. Then the robber knows. What? That the rob knows his robber. I wonder here if Lacan is saying that Baudelaire isn't making it clear that, I don't know, that the person being robbed, maybe the queen, is aware of the fact that she was being robbed. Maybe something like that. I'm not fully sure here, but I think it's kind of interesting that we started this conversation with Baudelaire's translation and we're continuing with it.
Yeah, it sounds like Poe kind of emphasizes a little that like the minister's like, this narcissistic relation depends on him knowing that the loser knows who the robber is.
You're
And
right. Yeah,
and
exactly.
then Baudelaire seems to be like cutting it up, I think, but I didn't read the French text of the Poe work, so I don't really know. But I think Lacan is saying that like Baudelaire kind of like broke it up a little bit, and it's not really obvious at that point. It's not really obvious how that relates to the minister's ascendancy into this narcissistic relation and is this imaginary idea of himself.
Yeah, and by breaking it up here, I think Lacan, especially towards the second part of this paragraph, it's with Baudelaire breaking it up, the issue comes from the fact that we need to know that the queen is aware, first and foremost. But then Lacan says it's not just the fact that the queen knows it's stolen, but it's how she is perceiving the robber that she is dealing with. That's what it says, what kind of robber she is dealing with. So it's not the fact that she knows, it's the fact that it's the person that she knows. And when we think of the minister, we think of someone who maybe was I mean, if he's obviously in close quarters with, the queen and king or whatever, it's very clear that this person has some power in the first place. And now they have this kind of immense power. Quote, for she believes him capable of anything. So it really shows there is this kind of level of ascendancy, like you said, narcissism. We have this imaginary identification that Lacan says at the very end here about since it is imaginary, that of absolute master, about how the minister is this absolute master of this situation, maybe. And
Yeah.
really quick, I wonder if absolute master here is written as imaginary because no one can fully have absolute mastery over another.
Maybe I can look for it in the text.
Yeah, but anyways, I mean, it's and sorry for jumping ahead here, but I think that it makes sense here that Lacan has started, and then he moves on to saying what matters is that the that she knows who robbed her. So did you have any comment there, homomorphism?
Not really. I just think that this would depend is very important here. Seems to be like sketching it out, and Baudelaire doesn't seem to really sketch out that relationship at all.
Hmm. So, okay, I see. It would depend upon the robber's knowledge of the loser's knowledge of the robber. So, I guess maybe Poe's making that clear, and Baudelaire's just not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And sorry for jumping ahead, but I'll read this paragraph because I just think that it makes sense. For what matters to the robber is not only that the said person knows who robbed her, but rather with what kind of robber she is dealing, for she believes him capable of anything, which should be understood as her having conferred upon him the position that no one is in fact capable of assuming, since it is imaginary, that of absolute master. I mean, I really think he's being clear here, and this is one of those moments where Lacan is having some clarity about. He's really talking about how Baudelaire is kind of mixing up the translation and says that, even if Baudelaire kind of wrote correctly that, oh, the queen, knows, and it's very obvious that she knows who robbed her. And what matters is kind of what kind of robber she's dealing with. And it's right that in the imaginary, it's that of the absolute master, someone who has absolute mastery over the situation. So that's what I take from this little bit here.
Yeah, I get the same thing.
Cool. If we're good, let's do it. Let's continue. In truth, it is a position of absolute weakness, but not for the person of whom we are expected to believe so. The proof is not only that the queen dares to call the police, for she is only conforming to her displacement to the next slot in the arrangement of the initial triad, entrusting to the very blindness required to occupy that place. No more sagacious agent could, I suppose, Dupin notes ironically, be desired or even imagined. No, if she has taken that step, it is less out of being driven to despair, as we are told, than in assuming the charge of an impatience best imputed to a specular mirage. So now he's commenting on the queen's sort of reaction and responding to the idea that the minister was in a position of kind of mastery. So, in truth, this supposed absolute mastery is actually absolute weakness. That's what he starts. But not for the minister, it looks like. Not for the person we are expected to believe. It's actually a position of absolute weakness for the queen. And he says that the proof here is because of the fact that the queen calls the police. So we see that the queen has no control at all over what has happened to the letter, and she has no way of getting it back on her own. So she has to resort to calling the prefect of police here. Now, it looks like Lacan is saying that this confirms to her displacement. So this confirms to how the characters are moving and exchanging places within this triad. So the original triad, kind of the first little glimpse of the story, is going to be the king, the queen, and the minister. But when the queen now turns to the police, she's shifting into a new role now within that triad. And feel free to interrupt me at any time, please, if you have something to say. Sorry, I thought I heard something.
No, I think I mean, you said the person we are expected to believe so is that we're expected to believe that the queen actually is in weakness, not the minister.
Right.
But like the rules switch places. Yeah, that's what I understood too.
Oh, okay, good. Good note here. So do you think that? So he's not saying that the minister though is in the position of absolute weakness, right?
He might be implying that actually, but like he's not saying it.
Yeah, I can't tell. I can't tell.
I mean, if anything, he's saying yes, the minister is in the place of absolute weakness because the queen has now gone to the police, even though the minister probably didn't imagine that she would. Um,
Oh, interesting. Well, and this is the crazy thing. It's that in truth, it's like it is a position of absolute weakness. That means that the position of absolute mastery is also absolute weakness. And maybe it's interesting because look at the minister. He now really can't destroy the letter because that means that he would lose power, right? Like he can't. Like he just has to wave it over her head in a way, let her know that he has it. But
yeah,
that also means that he's weak because he has to have the letter, right? Like he can't get rid of it.
he's in a position where he could be caught with a letter.
Ah, true. And the fact that the police are not called on him, it means that there's extra kind of weakness here. And the same thing goes for the queen. I mean, she was in this position of absolute mastery per her status, and now a position of absolute weakness where she has to rely on, the police. So it's like they're switching places in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I.
Yeah.
That's what I.
No, I mean it's fantastic. I mean it's really fantastic what he's doing here, and he's trying. I mean, what he's doing is he's talking about this at the level of the signifying chain, where you have all of these things in this part that are part of this chain: dog, cat, shoe, water bottle, Discord server, so on and so forth. All of these things are part of this chain, and there's one pure signifier in this chain, or at least according to how we're viewing this story. There's this pure signifier, and it's moving throughout this chain, and all of these other signifiers are changing places with one another, and that for Lacan is how this kind of subjectivity arises. That's how it mediates at least the way that the subject relates to the world. So it's actually kind of a little brilliant thing that a brilliant story that he's chosen to talk about it.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Now it looks like here Dupin makes Lacan says Dupin notes ironically here. So it looks like he's saying that the queen selected the most inept person for the task. I mean, the prefect of police is someone who is really not the person that she should have called in reality because they can't find something that's right in front of them. And instead, uh, Lacan but Lacan is going to here say no, uh, right after what Dupont said. It's not that the queen was desperate for Lacan. It looks like that's what I'm reading it as. It's that the queen's not desperate here, but instead, um, it looks like it was impatience. That's at the very end there. It says the charge of impatience best imputed to a specular mirage, or that kind of self image, that identification, that narcissism. Because you remember how the minister has this like narcissistic self identification that we talked about. I mean, if they're switching places in a way, I'm wondering, does she take on this narcissistic self identification as well, or if she's maybe always been narcissistic? Hence her impatience due to her narcissism caused her to call the police.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm still like kind of trying to understand what best imputed to a specular mirage means.
Yeah, I think specular mirage means like, oh, look at me, I'm like fancy. And I mean, at least that's the way that I read it. It's that maybe there's this impatience that's like, it's not that she's desperate in order to want to get the letter back, but that she needs to uphold her self image, which, causes her to become impatient. That there's this risk of her self image. I still don't know why that wouldn't be desperation in a way, but I think Lacan is just trying to show that if she waited out a bit longer, she could have been more calculated in how she approached the situation. Maybe
I
making,
also
I don't know,
I
making a
also
deal.
wonder if choosing that the queen chose this particular police person who doesn't do a good job of what they're investigating at all is kind of almost calculated. Like, she kind of knows that he doesn't do a good job, because what if he did a good job and figured out what the letter was about? And what if the letter was about something really
Again, now
bad?
he knows, right? Yeah, I mean, and that's the irony here. But I wonder though, but like, but I wonder why then, why that narcissism, or why that specular mirage, why impatience, why not despair?
Right. I actually, off topic a little bit, but I remember reading somewhere that we do know what the letter was about, but that might have just been someone's interpretation about what the letter was about. So I don't know. Do we actually know?
Well, I might be, I mean, right. I mean, I think later on, I have an idea of what the letter might be, at least per Lacan's analysis, um, later on. But I just looked up specular mirage, and maybe I'm wrong here. It says a type of mirage that appears as a mirror-like reflection on a surface that seems to be water or oil. So
Oh, that's good to know.
I don't know, like I'm not really sure what this impatience due to specular mirage. I mean, part of it reads as like a mirror, maybe something like a mirror stage, right? um, I don't know. Lacan could be doing something really unique here. I mean, he is saying that there's this impatience. I mean, I think in part it has to deal with some self-identification. No doubt. I mean, I think so. But I think we are good to continue if you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Lacan writes, "For the minister is kept quite busy, confining himself to the idleness which is presently his lot. The minister, in point of fact, is not altogether mad. That's a remark made by the prefect, whose every word is gold. It is true that the gold of his words flows only for Dupin and will continue to flow to the amount of the 50,000 francs worth it will cost him by the metal standard of the day, though not without leaving him a margin of profit. The minister, then, is not altogether mad in his insane stagnation, and that is why he will behave according to the mode of neurosis, like the man who withdrew to an island to forget what? He forgot. So the minister, through not making use of the letter, comes to forget it, as is expressed by the persistence of his conduct. But the letter, no more than the neurotic's unconscious, does not forget him. It forgets him so little that it transforms him more and more in the image of her who offered it to his capture, so that he now will surrender it, following her example, to a similar capture." Okay, so a few things do stand out here to me. I love this little island. I just felt that that was such good writing. I remember the first time I read it, and I thought it was really kind of clever the way that he wrote it. But let's start at the top here. So we know that the minister obviously can't. He kind of doesn't really know what to do with the letter. He can't get rid of it. So in a way, him just kind of leaving it in a general space shows this kind of idleness. And Lacan is saying that it's this idleness here is not evidence of the minister going mad. And if we remember earlier, the prefect believed that the minister had fallen into madness because he said, all poets are madmen, all madmen are poets, that kind of logical fallacy. But Lacan is very clear that the minister has not fallen into madness. So it's clear here as well. It almost sounds like when he says that's a remark made by the prefect whose every word is gold. Um, I wonder if this is saying that the prefect has very high hopes for Dupin in order to help him receive the letter, or it means that he praises uh, Dupin. So I don't know. Maybe it's showing a little bit of this contradictory nature of the prefect of police. Like on one hand, it says that like um, the gold of his words flows only for Dupin, right? And then it's also like at the same time, he wants to get the 50,000 francs that he desires, and he maybe sees here that there's this margin of profit. So maybe what the prefect is getting at is that maybe we can do a trade. I'll praise Dupont. I'll tell him that he is this kind of amazing, brilliant person, while simultaneously that's in exchange for the 50,000. So I think Lacan is starting a bit there. I don't know if I'm falling off here, but I think that makes sense.
Maybe I just don't remember the text very well, but I thought it was more that the goal of his words flows only for Dupin, and that Dupin is the only one really taking his words very seriously. But maybe
Hmm.
I'm reading them.
That's a good way of interpreting. I'm not, that could very well be it too. I mean, part of me feels that the prefect, I mean, come on, he's the lead chief of police guy. Like he really wants to be able to have this ability to, solve the crime, and he's kind of having to take a step back and say like, I can't do it. Like I need your help. So part of me feels like he doesn't want to praise Dupont, and I feel like he kind of has to be like, hey, I'm coming to you because you're the only person I know. So that's the way I took it, but I totally think that your interpretation might be the right one too. Like maybe Dupont is the only one who would take the prefect of police seriously here, or who would listen to his words seriously.
Yeah, I don't know. I should really read the text again.
No, I mean it's kind of funny. We read the text and then we do this reading for like months, right? And then we slowly start to forget like what the actual text was. I'm in the same boat, but I don't think this matters a ton here. I think what matters in general is when we get to neurosis here. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but let's get there now. When Lacan says the minister is not mad in his insane stagnation, that means that in his idleness he hasn't fallen into madness, but rather this is why he behaves according to the mode of neurosis. So neurosis refers to, um, and I take notes for the text. It refers to the psychological condition where an individual experiences conflict through repetitive and meticulous behaviors. So I mean, and it's kind of interesting that we are also talking about repetition automatism here as well. So the minister is engaging in this repeated, in a way, in action, causing him to be idle, causing him to just put the letter in a very normal hiding place, or just not even a hiding place at all. He just puts the letter down. So Lacan finds this to align with neurosis, and then he gives an example. And I love this sentence. Like the man who withdrew to an island to forget what he forgot. So the minister comes to forget it. I love that there. Um, and this example here where a man goes to an island to forget something is very similar to the minister. The minister doesn't need to go to an island, though. His use of the letter is one where he hasn't taken action with it. So it's this kind of, oh, I'm forgetting like what to kind of do with it. I'm just kind of, I know I took it. I know I set it down. What do I do with it? I don't know. And just like I'll think about it and then come to forget it. So it's truly this kind of inaction here. Um, so I find that interesting. You know, yeah. Do you take anything from that homomorphism here?
Yeah, I just take the repression aspect of neurosis. I feel like neurosis has like not only conflict, but like it's something that results from having repressed emotions and repressed memories, maybe that develops into symptoms which the person forgot because they're repressed, and Yeah. So like I find it interesting that like the minister would eventually be kind of neurotic in a way, even without being, maybe insane in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you bring up repression because my mind goes to like primary and secondary repression in psychoanalysis. Like, I think about how even in this story, there is a repeated theft and concealment of the letter. We know that. But maybe primary repression is the fact that he took it in the first place and he now has to hide it. And every time he goes back home, he sees it, right? It's like it's maybe there's this primary secondary repression thing going on which causes some inaction. He's not thinking about it. He's trying to forget it. And like you said, in a way, forgetting about it, it might very well mean he's trying to push it uh, out of conscious awareness. I mean, at least that's what secondary repression is. It's like when when there's this desire that is pushed out of or doesn't lead to conscious awareness because primary repression is where it was pushed out of conscious awareness, prevented from. Yeah. So I don't know. Part of me thinks about primary and secondary repression here. Um, but again, could be something else. Neurosis writ large is interesting, but it does say that the letter, no more than the neurotic's unconscious, does not forget him. So it's weird that the neurotic, in a way, isn't forgetting the letter because they're like trying to forget it in the same way that and maybe the letter is just it has such immense weight and power that he uh he can't forget it in a way. I mean, I know that sounds contradictory to be like, oh, like he's like going to an island to forget, but at the same time he he knows it's there, right? I mean, he knows that he has some power over the queen. He just doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, maybe the next sentence kind of gets more to the point too.
It forgets him, that one.
Yeah.
It forgets him so little that it transforms him more and more in the image of her who offered it to his capture. So you'll now surrender it, following her example to a similar capture. What do you take from this?
Um I just take from this that like Lacan's maybe saying that he acts kind of like a neurotic, but he's not actually neurotic. He's just constantly not making use of the letter. It slips his mind, and it slips his mind so much that he becomes the queen in a way, who is capable of letting the letter slip out from her own grasp. That's pretty much.
Hmm. So do you I mean, I just find it interesting here. It transforms him into the image of her. So is this the exchanging of place in the triad between the minister and the queen here? Is
Maybe,
this
yeah.
it could be maybe, but I like your analysis here. I mean, it's interesting. It transforms him more and more in the same way that, ironically, he's powerless to this letter. He can't get rid of it. He doesn't know where to put it, and simultaneously, the queen is powerless over the letter too. So both individuals have fallen inferior or beneath the letter or under its control. Um, so, so there you have it. Now, let's continue because I think this sentence here will definitely be about primary and secondary repression. So it says the features that the transformation are noted are in a form so characteristic in their apparent gratuitousness that they may validly be compared to the return of the repressed. So when we have primary repression, we have the unconscious, and this is usually, at least for Freud, I mean, it's going to be like early in childhood development, where you have these desires or thoughts that the unconscious blocks from uh, conscious awareness. I'm trying to think of like a good example Like for Freud, like if a child is touching their genitals, right? Uh, there's no thinking in the sense that like, oh, I want to go touch my genitals right now. It just kind of happens for the child. It's something that they do. And then the parent might swat their hand away or tell them that it's wrong, right? So that would be primary repression where we have this, uh, we have this unconscious blocking of that desire from reaching conscious awareness. And then later on in life, someone might feel guilty for touching their genitals, to use Freud here, because Lacan is building from Freud. And maybe they're not exactly thinking of the moment when they were a child, right? Like, oh, I remember when my parent did this. But they might feel some level of guilt. And that means that they are actively now feeling guilt and they're trying to push away this conscious feeling of wanting to touch themselves, right? So the idea is the return of the repressed is going to be this secondary repression. It means there is this active pushing away of conscious thoughts or emotions or desires that come from a primary source. Now, it looks like what Lacan is saying here is that the transformation from the minister to the queen is akin to the return of the repressed. Because maybe the primary repression here, and I think this is what we were talking about earlier, if maybe the primary repression was the minister tries to forget the letter, tries to escape to that island. He tries to suppress it from his, from reaching conscious awareness. But then he has to continue over and over and over again, repressing it from conscious awareness, which would be secondary. So I'm not sure exactly what primary would fully be here, but I think what Lacan is just getting at is that there's always this return of this repressed material within the minister, where he's constantly having to push out these desires and whatnot related to the letter. So it is kind of an interesting point being made here about the return of the repressed and how when we look at the queen has the power of the letter over her, and it's something repeated. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting primary secondary repression relationship here. Do you take anything from that homomorphism?
Not particularly. I think that's a good analysis of it.
Okay, because I'm not exactly sure what the primary repression would be here. Maybe just like the initial hiding of the letter, or maybe him forgetting the letter. But all Lacan is just getting at is that he's transforming into this position of the queen. Either they're exchanging places or whatever in that triad, because the letter now has power over the minister. Okay, and welcome, August. Good to see you. Let's do it. I want to read the next two paragraphs here. Thus, we first learn that the minister in turn has turned the letter over, not, of course, as in the queen's hasty gesture, but more assiduously, as one turns a garment inside out. So he must proceed, according to the methods of the day, for folding and sealing a letter, in order to free the virgin space on which to inscribe a new address. That address becomes his own. Whether it be in his hand or another, it will appear in an extremely delicate feminine script, and the seal changing from the red passion to the black of its mirrors, he will imprint his stamp upon it. This oddity of a letter marked with the recipient's stamp is all the more striking in its conception, since, though forcefully articulated in the text, it is not even mentioned by Dupont in the discussion he devotes to the identification of the letter. So when he is writing here about the turning of the letter inside out, I think what he's saying is that he's not like, literally turning the envelope inside out or putting it upside down or whatever. I think that he is using the letter in a way that that it was not intended. So I think that's what it means. In the same way that you would turn a garment inside out, it's still the same garment, but it has kind of a different maybe use or purpose. So that's kind of what I take from that first little sentence there. And then when we move to the kind of quote unquote virgin space on which he describes a new address, I think it means, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone wants to take this one, but maybe it's that his identity, his narcissistic identification is now kind of imprinted on the letter on like a free space. So he's now taken the letter for himself and kind of rewrote like and wrote a new address on it in order to, I don't know, address it in a way to himself or to address it in a way where he can manipulate it for his own kind of purposes.
I like that reading. I also have a much more pragmatic reading that might
Yeah,
be.
it's probably that one. So let's hear
Uh,
it.
it might just be that the way they folded letters back in the day, he had to refold the letter in a way that would make the address spot like open instead of whatever address was on it originally. So he unfolded the letter, kind of like unfolding it like you would like a piece of clothing, and then found a new space, and then just wrote the address.
You know, that's yeah. I mean, let's just merge ours. How about that? I mean, that open space on the letter. It's not that he's like actually writing down his own address. Obviously, it's more that he has the ability and space to, and metaphorically, he now makes the letter his. Right? It's now kind of become his property.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's the idea. I mean the next part here though, it's just so interesting that we're seeing this femininity constant throughout this piece. It's regardless of who holds the letter, it takes on a feminine appearance. There is a feminine script. Um, it's interesting, and then we see something like the color red here, and then the color black. We're seeing that the seal changes color metaphorically once again, where we have initially this emotion. We have this emotional aspect to the letter. Lacan says red of passion and then black of its mirror. So my kind of theory, in a way, is, and I think we'll get to it. Ooh, we're gonna get to it in the next sentence here. So I don't want to rush too much. But I think red of passion is going to be something that I want to come back to. But it's very clear that it goes from red to black as like a, you know, uh, more of a metaphor here. But then it says, and this is where it's interesting, this oddity of a letter marked with the recipient's stamp is all the more striking in its conception, since, though forcefully articulated in the text, it is not even mentioned by Dupin in the discussion he devotes to the identification of the letter. So when it says that the letter is marked with the recipient's stamp, is this saying that the letter itself has the Queen's stamp on it?
I do support that kind of reading. I just don't really know exactly who the recipient is in this case, and that's because I don't remember the text well.
Right. And because I think here the recipient, because so this is where it gets tricky. I think in a way it could be, the minister writing his own address now, right? Or quote unquote writing his own address. That makes this letter his. But the other part of me, and I'm forgetting if this was like written in the actual text by Edgar Allan Poe, and it might just be a very sly comment, or something small that we don't think much about. But if the Queen's letter had her own stamp on it, that means that she received her own letter back to her, which makes me think about what Lacan wrote earlier, a few readings ago, where when you want to break up with someone, you leave them on red, or back then, you send them their own letter back to them to show that you're done. So part of like my little theory here is that maybe the queen was having some kind of affair and the other person called it off.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because Lacan said it earlier. But again, I haven't read the text from Poe in a minute, so I'm not sure if the text even says that, oh, the queen's stamp was on it. But if the queen's stamp was on it, then that kind of changes the game. It's like, why is the queen receiving her own letter? Um, maybe we're good there. Now let's continue. We're moving from page 8 to page 9. So let's continue here. I think let's just get the next two paragraphs. Whether that omission be intentional or involuntary, it will surprise in the economy of a work whose meticulous rigor is evident. But in either case, it is significant that the letter, which the minister, in point of fact, addresses to himself, is a letter from a woman, as though this were a phase he had to pass through out a natural affinity of the signifier. Thus, the aura of apathy, verging at times on an affectation of effeminacy, the display of an ennui bordering on disgust in his conversation. The mood, the author of the philosophy of furniture, can elicit from virtually impalpable details, like that of the musical instrument on the table. Everything seems intended for a character, all of whose utterances have revealed the most virile traits to exude the oddest odor de feminia when he appears. So it looks like he's very much saying that the omission of the fact that the recipient's stamp is on the letter is kind of a big deal. And, because this work from Poe, or because maybe even Dupont is so, so smart or something, he's kind of saying, like, why hasn't this been talked about? Now, again, this could also just be the metaphor. I mean, we would have to look at the Purloined Letter piece to see if the Queen's stamp was actually, see if it was actually on it here. But in either case, whether or not we look at the stamp on the letter, what we should focus on is that once again the minister transforms into a woman or transforms into femininity, because this letter, the concealment of it, its origins, the fact that it was from the queen, makes it something feminine. Now, when he says the natural affinity of the signifier, this means that the letter has more meaning than solely whatever its contents are. Because not only does it have the meaning that pertains to the contents, it has meaning that pertains to the fact that it was stolen. When we move on to the aura of apathy paragraph, we're seeing that the minister, and earlier we saw through idleness as well, it says it verges at the times of on an affectation of effeminacy, meaning that minister is his attitude or whatever is to the point of seeming effeminate. So I'm not fully sure like what specifically the minister does other than just like leaving the letter out in the open. I don't know what else would make him fully effeminate. But maybe, I mean, I don't know. I can't really think of anything else other than just the fact that he took the letter. But then Lacan moves on to talk about the author of the philosophy of furniture, which means the philosophers who can just make philosophy about anything, even from like furniture. So the minister, regardless here, is just marked by femininity, by the smell of it, the odor of femininity, and Lacan ends that there.
For something interesting, there's a footnote after philosophy of furniture, which says Poe is actually the author of an essay that holds that title.
That's actually really cool. Good. Thank you for bringing that up. Oh, okay. I see. The mood, the author of the philosophy of furniture. So the author meaning Poe.
Exactly, yeah.
Very, very interesting here. I definitely need to add that. That's fantastic. It's weird. It's not like at least in this copy, it's not and it's not italicized or in quotes or whatever. So when I can't believe I overlooked that one. That's fantastic. So like the fact is like Poe can take something so mundane, right, and just come up with something really cool for it. And maybe the fact that the minister stole the letter and is still such a dull character just puts it on the table or whatever. Maybe Lacan is saying that Poe is intentionally making him effeminate. Okay, let us continue. Dupin does not fail to stress that this is an artifice, describing behind the bogus finery the vigilance of a beast of prey ready to spring, but that this is the very effect of the unconscious in the precise sense that we teach that the unconscious means that man is inhabited by the signifier. Could we find a more beautiful image of it than the one Poe himself forges to help us appreciate Dupin's exploit? For with this aim in mind, he refers to those toponomical inscriptions which a geographical map, lest it remain mute, superimposes on its design, and which may become the object of a guessing game. Who can find the name chosen by a partner? Noting immediately that the name most likely to foil a beginner will be one which, in large letters spaced out widely across a map, discloses, often without an eye pausing to notice it, the name of an entire country. Just so does the Purloined Letter, like an immense female body, screech out across the minister's office when Dupin enters, but just so does he already expect to find it, and has only, with his eyes, veiled by green lenses, to undress that huge body. So where Lacan is talking about like another game here, or kind of he's using some example. But before that, he does kind of talk about how Dupin notes that the minister is not truly effeminate. So I can't really tell. It says Dupin does not fail to stress that this is an artifice. Maybe what this means is that it's not that Dupin is truly effeminate, but rather he's putting up a facade. Maybe, like a beast of prey ready to spring. That means that maybe the minister is just kind of coming off as like a little bit weak, a little bit like I don't know what I'm doing, and then he's just ready to maybe expose the queen or something. Maybe he's just like always at that limit. From there, I mean, unless does anyone have something to say there? Okay. From there, it looks like Lacan talks about the unconscious, and he's saying that the very effect of the unconscious means that man is inhabited by the signifier. I think that's an important kind of line, or just the general understanding of the signifier shaping subjectivity. Now, for him, as we are drawing from the Purloined Letter, he obviously praises Poe for allowing us to understand how Dupin exploited the unconscious in a way especially with like the game of even and odd, or whatever, mind tricks that Dupin is doing, it looks like he's kind of, tricking the unconscious or taking advantage of it. And then towards the end here, we see that all of these toponomical inscriptions. So meaning just if you take a map of any kind, there's all of these names on it. So the name of a state, the name of a country, so on and so forth. Now, if you take a map and you play a game where I say, okay, August, like choose, I need you to find, I think I think it's a guessing game, meaning like find the, country that I'm thinking about right now. Or, find the city that I'm thinking about. And imagine that the city's name is literally across the whole map. And then if you don't pause and look at it from the outside, you're not going to be able to find it or see it. So, yeah, Purloined Letter. Just like the Purloined Letter, because the Purloined Letter is right out in the open. And the Purloined Letter is like an immense female body. So when Dupin enters the room, we see this immense female body, or if we're playing a game, a name that's just all over the map. And he has to, or maybe rather the Purloined Letter being an immense female body is akin to it being the map itself. Like you did this huge map here, and it's stretched out across the whole room. And what he has to do is, quote unquote, undress that body or find it. I don't know if there's anything we need to take from like an immense female body here, if this signifies anything. I don't know if he's using map for a specific reason. Like, what about the map here? But maybe this is just kind of straightforward. Okay, let's continue here.
Also, the female in his psychoanalysis is the signified, right? Whereas the male is the signifier. Or am I misremembering? So here he might be talking about how it's the signifier.
Or the signified.
Signified, yeah.
It's no. Don't be sorry. I think it's interesting here. It's weird because the letter operating as a pure signifier, it's like we're dealing with the letter itself, and whoever possesses this letter, regardless of its contents or regardless of the signified, they are now under that control of the letter. But in a way, the letter only has that kind of power because of its contents, even though we don't know it. So it's interesting that you're bringing that up here. The signifier is male. The signified is female. It could definitely be something along those lines. I'm not sure. I mean, in a way,
because the letter itself is in hiding here, right?
Well, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, Lacan says the letter is an immense female body kind of across the whole of the minister's office. So it could be, I mean, I think the idea is maybe in theory, it's everywhere. Like it could be anywhere. So it's like this immense body that Dupin undresses by making all of the other spaces naked in a way to find, in a way to find the letter.
So what you're saying is that sort of the entire room becomes the body because he doesn't know where the letter is.
I'm thinking, I mean, Dupin obviously has some idea when going to the minister, I'm assuming. Like he knows that what the police are doing is terrible because they're not finding it. So I'm assuming he has an idea going into the office that he knows where it's going to be. But Lacan does here, right, that it's this immense female body stretched out across the minister's office. Or maybe what we can think about is if there's this immense map, to use the example from before, there's this immense map, and you have to find the name of a specific city, right? And if the city, I mean, the name is written across the entire map. I think by undressing the map, it's the same thing. It's like you're slowly getting rid of all of the parts that are unnecessary and finding
I don't think
finding
I don't know, because the large letters are also the ones that are the most it's the most obvious. Also, they're the ones that are the biggest, and there are, like they said, they're across the entire map. So they're almost the things that would often catch your eyes first, but in a way that makes minimal impression, right? It's something that gets maybe catches your attention, and then it is discarded before it's even fully processed, right?
I like this. No, I like this. I mean, the letter is the same then, right? I mean, that's why he's
Yes,
saying, yes,
yes.
so does the Purloined Letter, right? It's like, I mean, the police saw it. Like the police not only saw it, they broke the room up into like fractional, like they broke it up into different pieces, and so they saw it, but you're right. I mean, it didn't leave any kind of impression. So it's interesting. I mean, I wonder if the eyes being veiled by green lenses, like we know that Dupin wore green kind of glasses so the minister couldn't see where his eyes were. That's kind of an interesting thing too. I mean, I think about like the other, right? Like in psychoanalysis, it's like Big Brother, and he kind of evades that sight from the minister and is able to kind of. I'm not saying he's escaping the other, quote unquote, but in a way, it feels like
Is a
he's
moment of
being.
clarity with the other, maybe.
Yeah, like I don't know. I think that there's something there too.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to do with, especially the. I wonder if there's something to do with how his eyes are being, like, my first thought upon reading it, because I didn't realize Dupin actually wore green glasses to not have his eyesight be seen. I forgot that detail. So my first thought was that something about the lens makes the large letters across the map stand out more.
Yeah. And I think part of it is like that you're not being watched, right? Like with the signifier, or with the symbolic order, I should say, there are all of these norms and rules and things that we need to follow. So in a way, there's this big other, and I'm being reductive here, like Big Brother watching our every movement, right? That's the
Okay,
other.
yeah.
And it's weird here that he wears these lenses to evade being watched by the minister, so he can kind of now look freely around the room in a way, um, and be more calculated. I mean, it's
I
weird.
like
The
that.
police were
Okay.
able to do that though, but they
No, they weren't, because they were abiding by the norms of the police.
and the minister wasn't there when they were doing it.
Mm.
So they might have thought that he had some brilliant, elaborate hiding place. Um, Whereas I think Dupin, who wasn't even like he didn't need to break in and take the letter. Like he very much just met with the minister. So
I
I don't know.
wonder if hmm, I wonder if there's anything here too about how maybe the minister did not have his eyes veiled, and so maybe there's a chance that the minister at some point gave it away by a glance.
Ooh, that's a good one too. That's a good one too. Gosh, there are so many there are so many cool ways to interpret this story. I mean, I love it. And what Lacan's doing here with showing how there's this process by which these characters are exchanging places in this chain is also really smart too. It's like they're taking on these roles of femininity. They're switching. Like the queen starts in this position of power or absolute mastery, and then, you know, she now gets into this position of weakness, and then, but because the minister sold the letter, putting himself in the position of mastery, and then he falls into weakness. It's like all of these characters and these chains are being affected, and they're showing, and Lacan is showing the process here. It is interesting, though, that with what you're saying, like, it is interesting that about the glance, we're talking about undressing the female body, where a lot of talks about femininity, glances and things along those lines, trying to hide his eyes, that level of secrecy that I think Lacan attributes a little bit to femininity. It's all just very interesting, relating it to some womanness here. Like, the story starts with the queen, as a woman, the only woman in the story being addressed, and then that femininity follows down the line of being exchanged further and further and further down. But yeah, August, great interpretations here. Okay, let us continue. And that is why, without needing any more than being able to listen in at the door of Professor Freud, he will go straight to the spot in which lies and lives what the body is designed to hide. In the gorgeous center caught in a glimpse, nay, to the very place seducers named St. Angelo's Castle, in their innocent illusion of controlling the city from within it. Look! Between the cheeks of the fireplace, there's the object already in reach of a hand the ravisher has but to extend. The question of deciding whether he seizes it above the mantelpiece, as Baudelaire translates, or beneath it, as in the original text, may be abandoned without harm to the inferences of those whose profession is grilling. Were the effectiveness of symbols to cease there? Would it mean that the symbolic debt would as well be extinguished? Even if we could believe so, we would be advised of the contrary by two episodes, which we may all the less dismiss as secondary in that they seem, at first sight, to clash with the rest of the work. And look, new Baudelaire disc just dropped. He's just digging in here. I actually wrote something specific about the fireplace. Let me see what I can find. Well, I guess before we get there, let's start with the door of Professor Freud. So it's interesting, when we're at the door of Professor Freud, we're not fully in the office. So we're, like psychoanalysis, we're kind of uncovering or trying to look at or examine what lies beneath that surface, right? So it's not just some simple surface level analysis, it's trying to get to a deeper thing. So when you listen in at Freud's door, or you listen in to someone speak about their desires or whatever, maybe it's not the most... I don't know if Lacan is saying that it shouldn't be taken as complicated. Like, maybe by listening in, it's just such a simple act, like walking by, listening in, and kind of getting meaning from it or understanding what's going on. I'm not sure. I do know that this little castle here, I looked it up, it's a very beautiful place, but I think part of the architecture of the castle, there's this center that reveals, if you're in the middle of the castle, it looks like you can look at every part of it. So it gives you this idea of control, or what Lacan calls this illusion of controlling the city from within. Like, you have this position that you are in that kind of gives you this illusion of mastery, maybe. So I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. I'm wondering, why stand at the door? That's my first kind of point that I'm seeing. I think there might be something there. And then it says Freud goes to the spot in which, where the body is hiding, where the body is designed to hide. And I mean, we just saw that there's this large female body that covers the whole room. Yet that large female body, even though it seems open, it's hiding something just that's out in the obvious, and maybe that's like the unconscious. It seems very open when someone is just yapping at their psychiatrist or whatever. It just seems open, but there's maybe something that's being hidden there that needs to be found, that the analyst needs to find, that pure signifier, that letter, that's structuring their subjectivity. So maybe that's what I take from it. I don't know if anyone else does. As for the fireplace stuff, it's interesting. He is criticizing Baudelaire a little bit, because Baudelaire writes above, Poe writes below. But I think for Lacan, it doesn't matter here. So the fireplace metaphor is showing that something is hidden there, but it's just out of reach, whether it be below or above. I don't know what the ravisher is in this context. I think it might be Dupin, who is about to try and take the letter, but he doesn't fully know where it is. He doesn't know if it's above the mantelpiece, below the mantelpiece, to the sides of the mantelpiece. He just knows it's somewhere. So I'm not fully sure. I'm not fully sure who the ravisher is here. Thinking it might be Dupin, or the ravisher just might be anyone who's about to take the letter. Because the reality is, the letter has always been the letter has always been there. It's been in plain sight. The queen puts it on the table. The minister puts it in a normal place, like, I don't know, like, I forget, like a bookshelf or whatever, or like on the table again. And then Dupin puts it right in front of the prefix, nose, as well. So I'm not sure here. I mean, I like how he says whose profession is grilling. I'm just kind of putting that together now. That could be some kind of metaphor about fire, grilling. I'm not fully sure.
Actually, speaking about that, can you click on footnote 14?
Of course.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of what I thought it would translate as, but you can also translate it as a stove. And you can also translate it kind of as like just cooking in general.
It says even to the cook herself?
Yeah, because it's even to the cook herself. He says really et même de la cuisinière, which is I mean, I would take that as being like the cook herself, but it could also just mean like what's like the stove or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Doesn't really matter.
No. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think that these things matter, of course. I mean, you bring in that translation help that is like that is just absolutely necessary. I feel like we've gotten very far with our conversations because of what you've pointed out. I mean, I think that all I think he's doing is just he's using a metaphor. He's using fire here. Fire hurts, obviously, if you put your hand in a fireplace or whatever. And the idea is that the object is just in reach. I think part of it is if you mess up, you'll get caught on fire. So if you think you found it but didn't find it, or if you didn't fully grab it, like you are, like the stakes are very high. That's kind of how I read it. But other than that, I think it's pretty. It might be a little straightforward. And then that little sentence after that, Lacan is talking about symbols losing their meaning. So he says, were the effectiveness of symbols to cease, meaning that what would happen if, symbols no longer had meaning? Like if dog no longer meant dog, so on and so forth. He asks, would it mean that the symbolic debt would be extinguished? So would it mean that our ties and what we owe to the symbolic order, our norms or cultural institutions, so on and so forth, would that be forever gone? And in a way, would our subjectivity also be forever gone in a way? So he says, even if we could believe so, he still thinks that that's not gonna happen. Like even if we could think that, I guess, signs lost their meaning, I think he says that they're, what does he say? That it clashes with the rest of the work. I mean, I think what he's saying is that through this story, we can see that the symbolic debt wouldn't be extinguished. I'm not fully sure what he's asking here, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, when I think of symbolic debt, I think of like things that we owe to our institutions or laws. And I think if these symbols lacked meaning, then clearly we wouldn't have this symbolic debt. Like that's where my mind first goes. But it looks like he's saying, no, even if we could believe that symbols, no longer had meaning or ceased to exist, he says we could dismiss as secondary because it clashes with the rest of the work.
I think this might make more sense with the next paragraph.
Yeah, let's do it. Why don't we read the next? Let's just read the next three. First of all, there's the business of Dupont's sorry, let me start over. First of all, there's the business of Dupont's remuneration, which, far from being a closing puree, am I saying that right? Homomorphism, puree.
Yeah, it's a word in English too. It's just pirouette.
Pirouette, okay, has been present from the beginning in the rather unself-conscious question he asks the prefect about the amount of the reward promised him, and whose enormousness the prefect, however reticent, I think that's how you say it, he may be about the precise figure, does not dream of hiding from him, even returning later on to refer to its increase. The fact that Dupont had been previously presented to us as a virtual pauper in his ethereal shelter ought rather to lead us to reflect on the deal he makes out of delivering the letter, promptly assured as it is by the checkbook he produces. We do not regard it as negligible that the unequivocal hint through which he introduces the matter is a story attributed to the character, as famous as it was eccentric. Baudelaire tells us of an English doctor named Abernethy, in which a rich miser, hoping to sponge upon him for a medical opinion, is sharply told not to take medicine, but to take advice. Actually, let's pause here first. So when we look at the initial question, were the effectiveness of symbols to cease there? Maybe it's not symbols writ large, like every single word or whatever. Maybe it's the symbols in the story, like the letter itself. And I think what I think maybe what Lacan is getting at is that even if somehow the symbols ceased to have importance, maybe we still have this question of money here. So what do you take from this homomorphism? Because I know you said maybe it would make more sense.
Oh, I just said that. Sorry, my cats are fighting.
No worries. Cats be crazy.
Yeah, I really didn't have a reason to say that it would be better with the next paragraph other than saying first of all. So
yeah, I mean, so I guess first of all, and we can always come back to symbolic debt. Lacan discusses that Dupont clearly has a reward for retrieving the letter, and he points out that he will be paid for doing so, for finding it, and that Dupont, in fact, directly asks the prefect about the reward too, which is interesting. This kind of makes us view Dupont a bit differently, and that's why Lacan says as a virtual pauper. When we first meet Dupin, he appears to be someone not focused on wealth. He appears to be someone focused on maybe research or being clever or intellectual pursuits. So it's weird that when, Dupin takes out his checkbook, it's like, okay, this dude is very much capable of getting money. And then when we get to this Baudelaire stuff again, Lacan is referring to a story about this wealthy guy who is seeking a medical cure from a Dr. Abernathy, this English doctor. Now, this rich individual hopes to purchase a cure in this little story here. But Abernathy gives him advice. We're assuming the advice is that money cannot buy, everything, including a cure. So, just kind of, I don't know, it just seems so random. It just seems really random with what Lacan is doing here. Yeah, it's a bit random. I don't know if this kind of answers the question about symbolic debt, but it's something we can always come back to. So yeah, what I take from this is that clearly Dupin cares a lot about money, but not only about money. He clearly cares about being intelligent and whatnot. And that's why maybe Lacan uses this story where it's like maybe Dupin is aware that money cannot buy anything. Like maybe Dupin is the I'm not sure. Maybe Lacan is trying to say that Dupin is either the doctor or is the wealthy miser in this story. I'm assuming it's not the rich miser. Yeah, he says, we do not regard it as negligible that the unequivocal hint through which he introduces the matter is a story attributed to the character as famous as it was eccentric. So he's maybe Baudelaire seems to be making this tie here between Dupin and this maybe story. If we're good there, we can continue. Do we not, in fact, feel concerned with good reason when for Dupin what is perhaps at stake is his withdrawal from the symbolic circuit of the letter, we who become the emissaries of all the Purloined Letters, which at least for a time remain in sufferance with us in the transference? And it is not the responsibility their transference entails which we neutralize by equating it with a signifier most destructive of all signification, namely money. But that is not all. The profit Dupin so nimbly extracts from his exploit, if its purpose is to allow him to withdraw from his stakes from the game, makes all the more paradoxical and even shocking the partisan attack, the underhanded blow he suddenly permits himself to launch against the minister, whose insolent prestige, after all, would seem to have been sufficiently deflated by the trick Dupin had just played on him. So it's a bit interesting here. It looks like Lacan is noting that Dupin is withdrawing from this symbolic circuit of the letter. Maybe by getting up and saying, hey, I'm going to give you the letter for money, he's kind of washed his hands of it. He's got his money. He's fine. Kind of like a good riddance thing. So maybe the money allows himself to distance himself from the letter. But I think what's interesting here, and maybe one of my favorite lines, Lacan writes, we become the emissaries of all the Purloined Letters. That means that we all, not just Dupin, or not just the minister or whoever, become carriers of Purloined Letters. And all of these Purloined Letters are in a state of sufferance, meaning that they were diverted from their path. They are in transit, but they haven't reached their destination. However, while they remain in transit, there's this transference going on. And transference refers to the idea that we project it's really just projection. Like we project these unconscious desires onto others. So it looks like as these purloined letters are making their way, we project it onto others. So maybe I'm trying to think of like an example in this story. I mean, can you all think of like a character projecting because of the purloined letter? I'm thinking maybe like the prefect of police. There might be projection there. Maybe a bit of projection on behalf of the minister. Not really sure, but it does look like transference. I mean, that's going to be Lacan's argument for transference. Then it's going to be that the purloined letter has not reached its intended destination, or the pure signifier has not reached its intended destination. Therefore, there's this kind of projection, or transference. Yeah, it's interesting here. I mean, it almost makes it seem as though transference is like a primary thing rather than secondary, because the pure signifier is always kind of reaching its intended destination. It appears, right? Like it's always in the state of flux. The symbolic chain is never finished. So it seems like transference is just this inevitable thing for Lacan because of the placement of the pure signifier. My question is a little bit like, why projection though? So throwing that out there. And then he moves on. He talks about kind of money here being the most destructive of all signification, and how essentially everything becomes reduced to some monetary value. Which means that even unconscious desires and drives and so on and so forth, those things can be exchanged for money. Or at least that's kind of how we're conditioned to view money. And then finally, we have, but that's not all, and the profit Dupin so nimbly extracts. I mean, it's a big trick here, and I think the trick is that Dupin tricks the prefect of police. Essentially, once he takes his checkbook out and everything, he hands him the letter, and he tricks the prefect of police, as he has the letter. But in a way, he's tricking the reader. I mean, now we're wondering, like, what is his true intention? Like, what is Dupin's true intention? Okay. I feel good there. I do want to put a little pin in the transference question, though. Like, I'm gonna have to think about that myself. Like, why is the letter in transit the cause of projection? Maybe it's because, yeah, I have to think about it more. Let's continue here. We have already quoted the atrocious lines Dupin claims he could not help dedicating in his counterfeit letter to the moment in which the minister, enraged by the inevitable defiance of the queen, will think he is demolishing her and will plunge into the abyss. Facilis descensus averni, he waxes sententious, adding that the minister cannot fail to recognize his handwriting, all of which, since depriving of any danger a merciless act of infamy, would seem, concerning a figure who is not without merit, triumph without glory in the rancor he invokes. Am I saying that right? He invokes, stemming from an evil turn done him at Vienna at the Congress, only adds an additional bit of blackness to the whole. Okay. So, does anyone, I don't know. So, anyone have any ideas here? Maybe, I mean, so clearly he says will think he is demolishing her and will plunge into the abyss. So when we're talking about how Dupin is viewing the minister, I wonder if it's talking a little bit about the same way in which how like how the minister views the queen. I wonder if that's how Dupin views the minister in a way. It's that maybe they both see this downfall. Like, look at the queen. She obviously made the mistake of kind of going against the kingdom. She wasn't. She was kind of illegitimate in whatever her dealings were in some way, shape, or form. And this quote, "Facilis descensus averni," means the descent to hell is easy. So part of me thinks that, oddly enough, how the minister views the queen, well, that's the same way that Dupin views the minister. It means that the minister's, true, easiness, or the true act of him taking letter, it was a very easy process. Yet at the same time, that is the start of his downfall. So it was something so simple. Now,
Yeah, the forsaking of their duty.
say that again?
I would say it would be something like the forsaking of their duty, right? Eventually led to their downfall.
Mm-hmm.
Although in this case, I guess not the queen's downfall in the long term, but
That's actually interesting too. Maybe her hell is just the fact that she, wasn't sure if, if she was going to get caught in a way. But yeah.
okay, yeah.
But you're right that the minister also someone who's supposed to be there, and Lacan talked about it earlier in some of our early readings. The queen is supposed to be there or the minister is supposed to be there for the queen, maybe giving her advice, going after the person that sent her the letter. But he, like you said, forsake his duty. He no longer is being an honorable person. The thing about the handwriting here is interesting. Dupin's, discussion, or what he says here, is that the minister cannot fail to recognize his handwriting, and that makes me think about when that makes me think about when Dupin left the decoy letter, because the Dupin took a fake letter and threw it down, and then took the minister's stole the letter back in a way. Maybe the minister didn't notice that. So I'm not fully sure here. I mean, what I take from it is that I think maybe the minister becomes a little overconfident in thinking that he is not going to get caught in a way. He becomes overconfident that he really knows his handwriting extremely well and will always notice a decoy, when in reality, he didn't notice that Dupin stole the letter from him. Something along those lines. And then Lacan says an evil turn done to him at Vienna. I'm assuming the Congress of Vienna, something to deal with the minister's power and position politically. So maybe there's some background info, but Lacan doesn't kind of go too much into detail.
Yeah, I have no clue what that's referencing.
Yeah, so probably just some background info. So maybe there's some other things that add just even more of a descent to hell for the minister.
Unless it's
Okay.
like what year was the Purloined Letter the writing set in? Maybe it's referencing a historical event.
Oh, true. Could definitely be a historical event here. Yeah, definitely could be. I'm going to kind of write that one down. So yeah, the Congress of Vienna was a series of diplomatic meetings that took place in 1814 and 1815. I didn't even look it up. I'm surprised. For some reason I thought I did, but I guess I didn't. So yeah, maybe there's some historical thing going on here. Okay. Let us finish at least up to here. Let us consider, however, more closely this explosion of feeling, and more specifically, the moment it occurs in a sequence of acts whose success depends on so cool a head. So let's analyze the succession of events. It comes just after the moment in which the decisive act of identifying the letter having been accomplished, it may be said that Dupin already has the letter as much if he had seized it, without, however, as yet being in the position to rid himself of it. He is thus, in fact, fully participant in the intersubjective triad, and, as such, in the median position previously occupied by the Queen and the Minister, will he, in showing himself to be above it, reveal to us at the same time the author's intentions. Oh yeah, I looked. So there's a few typos here, but I looked it up. I'll look at my notes after, but I think that's authors. If he has succeeded in returning the letter to its proper course, it remains for him to make it arrive at its address, and that address is in the place previously occupied by the king, since it is there that it would re-enter the order of the law. As we have seen, neither the king nor the police who replaced him in that position were able to read the letter because that place entailed blindness. Rex et ager. The legendary archaic quality of the words seems to resound only to impress us with the absurdity of applying them to a man, and the figures of history, for some time now, hardly encourages us to do so. It is not natural for man to bear alone the weight of the highest of signifiers, and the place he occupies as soon as he dons it may be equally apt to become the symbol of the most outrageous imbecility. This, to me, is decently straightforward until the very end.
I just had a quick interjection about the Vienna Congress. The Congress of Vienna was the peace talks that happened after Napoleon's last conquest in 1815. 1814, 1815 was when the Congress took place. So that's when the minister probably would have been established as a position.
Interesting. So
Because it's
maybe,
when, yeah, go ahead.
it's maybe like that's like being in that position at that time. Maybe it's extra difficult. Maybe he can't live up to previous leaders, kind of thing. Because it says that adds an additional bit of blackness to the whole. I mean, it's making it even worse for the minister. It looks like.
Since depriving of any danger, a merciless of infamy would seem concerning a figure who is not without merit, a triumph without glory, and the rancor. What is rancor?
I think it's like
Bitterness or resentfulness. Okay.
yeah, I was gonna say like anger, but bitterness is probably better.
So, stemming from an evil turn done him at Vienna. So I wonder if the minister.
But I wonder if it's like done by him or done to him. It's like I wonder if he.
Done him. I think that phrasing usually would mean done to him.
Yeah, I think so too. So something happened there. The minister's in a rough spot. And I wonder though, maybe there's something political here. If there's an evil turn done to him, that means that there's something political. So maybe he already wasn't in good graces with, king and queen kind of thing. But that's just speculation.
Yeah, I wonder. That would be an interesting historical thing to look up, I guess.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit hard to research, but maybe someone would know.
Oh, I'm sure some random college grad wrote like a 50-page essay on just how Lacan mentioned that one time. we just have to find it,
Good idea, yeah.
Or we are the first, to find something. So to go over these few lines really quickly, I think essentially it's pretty straightforward. Like Dupin gets the letter, that completes everything. He is able to take it, he's able to dispose of it, and the only issue, quote unquote issue, is that he now is within this median position. He's fully participant in the intersubjective triad, according to Lacan. He is now part of this structure and repetitive nature of the story of the theft and concealment of the letter. However, it says, will he, in showing himself to be above it, reveal to us at the same time the author's intentions? I mean, however, Dupon's demeanor throughout the entire story comes off as, I'm kind of better than this. You're coming to me, I don't care too much, I don't have stake in the game, I just want to get my paycheck and leave, kind of thing. So it's a bit interesting. So Lacan is kind of saying, what are Poe's intentions? What are the author's intentions here with Dupont? But oddly enough, though, even though Dupont finds the letter and successfully has it, his job is not finished until it arrives at the address. So it literally says, he has to make it arrive at its address. So he is very much an active participant in the story, allowing it to go back full circle to the place of law where the king and queen live. Yeah. And then the statement Rex et Agur, again, not augur, I guess. It's just translated to king and augur. Let me Google. Augur is a noun and a verb that means to predict the future using omens or signs. So the king and augur. Or an augur was a priest and official in the classical Roman world. So there's a few different definitions here. So in ancient Rome, augur is used to refer to this kind of official or priest. And these people have great authority. And what it's saying is that to kind of attribute these qualities to the king and augur, would be something kind of laughable here. Because for Lacan, it says there's this absurdity of applying them to any man in general. So whoever the man is, it's absurd to kind of give them that level of, I don't know, not like power, but men are just men, not necessarily these prophets. And then it says that the minister appears, like the last sentence here, or not last, but like third to last. It says, and the figures of history for some time not hardly encourage us to do so. It is not natural for man to bear the weight alone. And the first place he occupies with imbecility. Okay, yeah, so it looks like this imbecility thing, I can't tell, is this imbecility question about the minister or the king? It says, the place he occupies as soon as he dons it may be equally apt to becoming the symbol of the most outrageous imbecility. So maybe what this means is that he who dons this position of augur or royalty appears to be an imbecile. I'm not sure if Lacan is saying like the minister in particular is this role because he tried to steal the letter and put himself in that position, or because this is kind of about the king, I'm wondering if it's just saying that the king being a king in the first place makes him an imbecile. I don't know if anyone has comments there. So, the three questions from today. The first one is about symbolic debt. This is something important to kind of come back to. The second thing is going to be the transference question. Like, why is the letter in transit? Like, how does that result in, in transference, right? So what about the letter not having reached its destination makes it in transference? And then finally, at least for me, is this question about who is the imbecile here? I'm leaning towards it being the king. But it looks like there's a footnote here for 16.
Yeah, I think you're right about the king because of the footnote. So read the footnote.
Ah, thanks. We recall the witty couplet attributed before his fall to the most recent in date to have rallied Candide's meeting in Venice. There are only 5 kings left on earth, the 4 kings of cards and the king of England. That's actually a really cool quote. I love this. Okay, so we found the answer to that question. So the next reading we do, is going to be solely this final page. So we have 1 page left, so it shouldn't be as long. We are so close. And then I think the next reading will be nice because we'll finish on time. And as we finish on time, I'm trying to re-underline it, whatever. And as we finish on time, or as we finish way ahead of time, I should say, we'll be able to kind of have like a little breakdown, maybe. I'm kind of also getting through 1.5 of Lewis and Guattari's Anti-Oedipus, and it could be very interesting to discuss like that single sentence that they reference the Purloined Letter, and just to see like what it might be about. So with that being said, I'm gonna stop recording here. Does anyone have anything to say?
Just one thing. If any of you, sorry, I got like stuck in a hole. That's why I kind of wasn't really here for a little bit.
No worries.
But if you guys are wondering about the symbolic debt,
Ooh, nice.
comment, Lacan actually wrote a section in his the Freudian Thing, which is also in Writings 1, where he talks about, it's called Symbolic Debt, the section.
Well, do you have any idea what he means here when he says, like, if the symbols cease there, it would mean that the symbolic debt would be extinguished? Like, he seems to be asking this question. I mean, I'm curious if he means symbols holistically speaking, or symbols as in the letter, what the letter represents.
I mean, I don't really have an answer for that, but I can read the symbolic debt section for next week and
Okay.
try to see if it helps.
Perfect. Yeah, let's come back to this and then the transference question, and then we will be. Wow, we are very close to being done with this, and I'm also very excited because time to move on from Lacan. But great chatting. I'm gonna end the recording now.